Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter, New York Giants football podcast. I'm Dan Schneier, joined as always by my co-host Nick Velato. We're here to recap the second episode of the Giants Hard Knocks series, Nick. And, I'm just really excited about what's going down here with the Hard Knocks. I wanted to start by just saying this version of Hard Knocks for me, and yeah, it's the Giants, so maybe I'm a little biased. I may have said this on the first episode.
Maybe a little.
So much more interesting than the training camp version of the Giants. I'm so much of Hard Knocks. Like, it's just so much more of what we want to learn about in my mind than like, oh, this guy's practicing well, or like just lame stuff that I feel like is just pretty obvious or just not all that telling. So I've really loved the insight that we've gotten. This episode had my favorite, excerpt of what we've had on either episode so far, which was the quarterback interviews, which we're going to get into. I thought those were enlightening. So just an awesome insight into what goes down in the roster building process. Have you been enjoying it as much as I have?
I have been. It's the behind the scenes look at what happens throughout the pre-draft process. And we always speculate. And I feel like we have a pretty solid understanding, at least generally speaking, on how these things occur. But just hear like Joe Schoen jump on the phone and be like, hey, Chris Rossetti, did you see that the cap is actually more than we anticipated? And now we can spend on all these free agents. And did you peek that, by the way? He was saying, I'm watching free agents right now. He was watching the Texans defense against the Ravens offense. I'm wondering who he was watching at that time. Just curious.
Yeah, I don't know who he was watching at that time. If you're thinking about just the free agents on both sides of the ball there, maybe from the Texans defense, it might have been what he was looking at. I don't know exactly. There are a few players who are in the mix there, potentially be signed by the Giants, but it was cool to watch him grinding through the tape and trying to look for free agents there. I know Dave Gettleman also watched tape as well, so it's not like he didn't do that. That led him, I believe, to the Patrick Maye signing. He saw something he liked on the tape there, despite obviously it not working out for the Giants. But hopefully Joe Schoen's tape grinding goes a little further. I thought before we get into kind of the nitty gritty of the episode, Nick, I thought it was really interesting to consider one little moment that maybe passed over many and they didn't really put too much time or thought into. And it was the conversation between Joe Schoen and Shane Bowen, the Giants' new defensive coordinator. I think there's such a stark contrast to what the Giants are doing now on the defense side of the ball versus what they were doing with Wink Martindale. When Wink Martindale was here, the prioritization was on cornerbacks and winning through coverage. And now it seems like it's just going to be so different. From the very first episode, we saw Shane Bowen break down his defense, and he discussed we're going to win with the front four. And then on Hard Knocks, Joe Schoen shifted the focus there and, basically said they were exploring signing Christian Wilkins to add to the front. And we'll talk more about that a little later. We're trading for Brian Burns to add to the front. And then he said, well, if we do that, I can play corner. And I think it just goes to show how different this Giants defense is going to be schematically and not only just schematically, but just how they plan to win this year. It's a very different idea and it's a very different mindset of how to win football games on the defense side of the ball. And maybe it can quell some of the concerns about what they've done at corner by just having such a strong defensive line.
That's what we hope, right? It's going to be split field coverages. It's going to be a stark contrast to your point from Wink Martindale's single high, heavy press man coverage. It's going to be more off outside leverage. It's going to be more safeties are going to be basically playing man coverage once the routes are declared. We've been talking about this all offseason. Going to be a lot less blitzing. Going to be a lot less 5-man pressure packages. Going to be a lot less 6-7-man pressure packages or whatever the Giants would do with Wink Martindale. That was just wild and crazy. They're going to need an edge rusher from a wide angle who can stress and corner at the top of the pass rushing arc. That's what Brian Burns is. Now you have Dexter Lawrence to create the interior pressure. Hopefully we get another year of development from Kayvon Thibodeaux where he can take, I would say, another step. I'm pleased with Kayvon Thibodeaux, but I'm not pleased with Kayvon Thibodeaux, if you know what I'm saying.
Well, I think that's part of what, and we'll discuss this a little bit more in a bit when we get into it, but I think that's part of why, let's get into it right now, Nick. Let's get into the idea of the Giants, obviously in this episode, made it clear that they were looking strongly at Christian Wilkins in free agency. Defensive tackle for the Dolphins, good friend of Dexter Lawrence. I think they're actually like best friends. Would you have preferred the route the Giants went, which is you trade the 2, you trade the 5, so you don't have your second pick. That was 39 overall, so you can consider it, Nick, by looking at the players who were selected around 39 overall, the players selected after 39 overall. Giants would have then had one of those players, Nick, and you could kind of take your pick of who you would like there. We're going to go with that, not versus what we think the Giants would have done. Just you take your pick type of thing. So now you get Christian Wilkins and that around the same price, because Christian Wilkins would have signed a contract pretty similar to what the Giants gave Brian Burns, despite being an interior guy versus an edge, or Brian Burns, What would you have preferred?
I think I would prefer Brian Burns. I'm pulling up the 2024 NFL draft at the moment. Christian Wilkins, look, he had no more than 33 pressures in any season up until last year, where he had 61 and he kind of bursted onto the scene. Everyone knew who he was before that, but he was like a BJ Hill, maybe a little bit better than a BJ Hill type of player. And now he's a top defensive lineman. And it would have been cool to reunite him with Dexter Lawrence's former teammate, one of his best friends. But what Brian Burns can offer specifically to Shane Bowen's scheme, I feel like is more valuable than what Christian Wilkins can offer. Now, the question is it more valuable than a second round pick? I think I lean Brian Burns, though. I do believe it is close. I think having that dominant edge rusher that can dictate protection along with Dexter Lawrence, along with Kayvon Thibodeau, possibly Azeez Ojulari, is more important than another defensive lineman who's not necessarily a commanding interior defensive pass rusher, can rush the passer, doesn't have the potential to be, I think, the top one in the league. Whereas Brian Burns, is he TJ Watt or Myles Garrett? No, but he can get up to like the top 5. He at least has that potential and that ceiling. And with Dexter Lawrence, the possibility of that ceiling being reached is enhanced. So I'm going to lean towards Brian Burns, but I do think it is a good discussion. What are your thoughts?
So I can go, and I'll let you look at it after if you want to or decide. But for me, I'll pinpoint as if we had done the other route, which is signed Christian Wilkins for a similar price and kept that pick, it would have been Cooper DeJean for me at 39 overall. And if it's Cooper DeJean for me at 39 overall, I'm leaning toward using DeJean as a nickel within Shane Bowen's defense, or similar role to what they're projecting for Drew Phillips, who they took in the 3rd round. So now in my scenario, I have Cooper DeJean, Christian Wilkins, and then instead of Drew Phillips in round 3, I have either Christian Haynes to play guard, or I have Cooper Beebe to play guard. So now I have that on my offensive line as well. So I've added Cooper DeJean, and I've lost Drew Phillips, and I've lost Brian Burns, and I've added Christian Wilkins, Cooper DeJean, and let's say I preferred Cooper Beebe of that. So let's say Cooper Beebe. Though I was close on those two. So it doesn't matter, Haynes or Beebe. I still prefer the Brian Burns side of this, despite getting all of that out of the other side. For me, it comes down to this, I need to watch more. I mean, I don't have the opportunity to, and I know you don't either, to watch film of every player in the NFL on every team. That's an impossible task. But I do tell you this all the time, Nick. I learn X's and O's through people like you and people who, other people in your way that know it as well as you have, doing breakdowns. And I stumbled upon about 3-4 months ago a great X's and O's breakdown of Christian Wilkins against the Chiefs in the playoff game. And to be quite frank, he was dominated in that game by the Chiefs' interior offensive line. And the Chiefs have really good players on the interior offensive line, but that would never happen to Dexter Lawrence. It would just quite point blank never happen to Dexter Lawrence. He doesn't get dominated like that, taken out of a game. He was taken out of that game, Christian Wilkins. Supposed to be a star interior guy. He's taken out of the game against the Chiefs in the playoffs. And I don't want to pay that kind of money and allocate that kind of salary cap space to a player who can be taken out of the game in the playoffs. So I don't personally want to allocate that much money to Wilkins. I don't think he's as good as everybody else does. I lean toward what Chris Rossetti said in the first episode of Hard Knocks. He doesn't believe he's a true difference-making pass rusher. I agree with him on that. And so I would much rather allocate that money to Burns, who I believe in. Have I watched all of Burns' tape at Carolina? No, but we've watched enough. When we traded for him, we watched tape. I watched tape of him at Florida State, where I absolutely loved him. He was one of my favorite players in that class. I thought he should have been in the mix for the pick at 6, assuming at the time I thought Josh Allen would come off the board, the pass rusher Josh Allen. He was on the board, but I was like, Burns is so good, he deserves to be in the mix at 6. That's how high I was on him. You can find the tweets about it. And actually, Brian Burns' brother reached out to me during that draft process. He's like, thank you so much. You were like, it's so crazy to see when that type of stuff happens, but he reached out to me. He's like, thank you so much. You were in my brother's corner this whole time. Like, it's just so weird that like your tweets reach these types of people. But and I think he's maybe not reached his potential yet with the Panthers, but it could happen with Shane Bowen. I think that's the expectation. And you throw the third thing on here, Nick, which is the impact it's going to have on Kayvon Thibodeau, having that relief of having a pass rusher like that on the other side of him, consistently winning, consistently getting those double teams and the attention of the offensive line and the offense coordinators. That to me is more valuable than what Christian Wilkins brings. So I lose Cooper DeJean, I lose Cooper Beebe, I gain back Drew Phillips, and I get Brian Burns. To me, this is what I would prefer.
Look, Dexter Lawrence had a 71% double team rate last season. He's getting double teamed all the time. Teams construct rosters to defeat the teams in their division. This is something we've discussed for years, right? Philadelphia Eagles have only allowed, I believe, 9 pressures to Dexter Lawrence and no sacks over the last 2 seasons. It's not great because he has Jason Kelce, Landon Dickerson, and those guards that can all prioritize Dexter Lawrence and even keep 5 5 men in because you have Lane Johnson and you have Jordan Mailata to handle Kayvon Thibodeau. Kayvon Thibodeau's not quite there yet. But when you do use space to your advantage as a defense in obvious passing downs, first you got to get to those obvious passing downs, and you force those tackles to kick out into space to cut off the angle of Brian Burns. And by adding Brian Burns, it adds a speed element. Now, those tackles are really good, right? Those tackles are really good. You're still probably going to get double teams on Dexter Lawrence, but you're going to need a tight end. You're going to need a running back probably kept in there with the speed of Brian Burns, with the explosiveness of Brian Burns. Even against those top tackles, he certainly enhances your ability to rush the passer and force the quarterback to step up into the pocket where Dexter Lawrence and whoever else is rushing the passer is. Brian Burns is his impact as a pass rusher is already 2 steps ahead of where Kayvon Thibodeau is. And if Kayvon Thibodeau can take another step, if he could take that another step, you're talking about a pass rush that can be dominant. If you could just force 2nd and 8 situations or 3rd and 6 situations and have those guys pin their ears back, you don't need to bring those extra guys. You don't need to bring them. You can allocate them in coverage. You can bring 4 and you can get home. We said this last year and we were wrong, Dan. We were wrong. But our train of thought was correct. And if the Giants offense didn't suck so badly, we would have saw it a little bit more often. This Giants pass rushing squad has the ability to be top 10 in the league if they are put into a situation where they can rush the passer a little bit more. Right. Brian Burns, he is the closer he is the Mariano Rivera to the pass rushing group. Brian Burns. When it's 3rd and 8, you need a play. Brian Burns pins his ears back. He goes. You can slant him inside to help take advantage of the fact that teams are double teaming Dexter Lawrence so much as well. I think there's just a lot you can do with his specific skill set as a pass rusher. You just need to put your team collectively, New York Giants, in a position where rushing the passer is paramount all throughout the game, through 4 quarters, Dan, not just in the first half.
Well, that's a great point because, that will unfortunately depend on the offense. The offense has to keep the Giants in games. Winning football games would even be better if the Giants can give the defense a few 14-point leads, 10-point leads, 20-point leads every once in a while. And by every once in a while, I mean, hopefully often. I mean, that's the goal, right? Then the pass rush comes alive. Like, part of why we didn't see the pass rush last year is because they were playing from behind so often and teams are running the ball on them and grinding clock or throwing quick hitting stuff because they don't need to take shots down the field because they're ahead in the game because the Giants offense is pathetic. That has to change, obviously, for the pass rush to come alive. No pass rush can thrive in the NFL from a statistical standpoint without an offense. It's just not how it works. If you're behind in games, you don't rush the passer. So you're right about that. But I do think ultimately Brian Burns, I watched him at the pass rushing summit show off some of his technique and his moves. I think ultimately he adds a different level to me than what Christian Wilkins could have offered. That's just what I've seen from Wilkins. I need to watch more of Wilkins to get it definitive. But again, watching that tape against KC, that breakdown against the Chiefs, it was not something I would want to allocate $25 million a year to. And I think there could even be some regret there. I'm not saying there will be. We'll see what happens there. I just don't feel that way with Brian Burns. All right, let's get to the crux of the show, or at least what I thought was the best part of the show. And that was the quarterback interviews, Nick. And there's a lot more to unpack after that. They went back to the Barkley stuff, the trade talks with New England. We're going to get to all of that. But let's start with them interviewing quarterbacks at the combine. And let's start with your notes, or let's start with the Giants' notes going into the whole thing, right? Because I thought this was really important. The scouts gave notes on each quarterback, and then Brian Daboll used those notes that were handed to him and then asked questions to these quarterbacks and framed the interviews of the quarterbacks based on the notes he got, which I thought was super interesting. So, Nick, you want to go over real quick what notes the Giants got or Brian Daboll got from these area scouts?
Yeah, the area scouts, Scott Hamill with Jaden Daniels. Some of his notes were he's not a vocal leader, but he improved in his final season. Mind you, he was 23, I think, in his final season. So it's a little bit easier to be a vocal leader. Obviously, he had his stint at Arizona State, and then he went to LSU. He seemed to question his recall, which was very important because when Brian Daboll was interviewing him, he asked him so how do you decompress? Basically, he's like, how do you decompress if you're struggling and the media is after you? How do you decompress? And Jane Daniels I talked to my family. He's like, what was that play call that I mentioned to you before? And Jane Daniels kind of got it. It was, he seemed to fumble with some of the verbiage, Jane Daniels, a little bit when it came to the recall. So it seems like Scott Hamill's assessment of Jane Daniels was spot on. Patrick Hanscom was the area scout for Drake Maye. I actually met Patrick down at at the Senior Bowl, and I talked with him for a little while. He seemed like a pretty cool guy. He said he had a very similar personality to Daniel Jones, no issue with the football character, and the mental side is certainly a plus. That was substantiated when you got to see Drake Maye repeat what Brian Daboll was asking him at the whiteboard. And then we had Blaze Bell, the area scout for Caleb Williams, who, mind you, Caleb Williams, when he was walking up to the in one of the scenes, he's walking up and there's a scout next to him, an Atlanta Falcons scout. That's my boy Dante Fargnoli. I was at the scouting academy with him. I'm so proud of him. He was like the Reese's Senior Bowl assistant director under Jim Nagy and before that Phil Savage. And I saw FaceTime. I sent him a picture. I was like, "Yo, bro, you're getting famous over here." So happy for him. But it's Caleb Williams, and the scout again was Blaze Bell. He said they kind of questioned the fact that the New York Giants are playing such a big market. It seemed like Caleb Williams loves football, is what they said, but he didn't talk after the UCLA game, and they questioned how he can handle adversity. Brandon Profit with JJ McCarthy said he's young. He had liberty to check at the line of scrimmage and kill plays, but the offensive line was the one who set the protections and set the point for the run game. But JJ had the ability to override all of what the offensive line set. So they were just kind of questioning how much he would be able to handle at the line of scrimmage at the NFL level. Can he do all of those things? Why was the offensive line doing it? But they, as I said before, acknowledge the fact that he's a very young player.
Yep, and that's what the area scouts gave Dable. So now let's get into the actual interviews that we saw with the quarterbacks. And we're going to get to more like there were area scouts comments on Odunze and Nabers from Hannah Burnett and Scott Hamill. Hannah Burnett was kind of like the star scout of the show, I feel like, for the Giants. They gave her a lot of airtime, which was cool. She seemed like, a pretty cool scout there. And same with all the other scouts there. They really seemed to me like when you got to know them at that dinner, which we'll get into at St. Elmo, like they really put in a shit ton of work into this.
Yeah, you haven't been out to the combine, have you?
No, unfortunately.
So St. Elmo's is a huge thing in the scouting community. It's something every year when people go out to, and I haven't been out to Indianapolis, but I've heard St. Elmo's referenced so many damn times because of that shrimp cocktail.
It looks so good, man. Like mixed in the sauce like that.
Yeah.
Fire. I wanted some of that.
If we ever get out there, we gotta hit that up. Are you good with hot stuff?
Oh, I love hot. Yeah, I love hot sauce. Love hot food. Yeah, spicy's good. I'm a pro spice. We should just go out there this year, Nick, and just screw it. And we'll work from there. Do whatever we have to do from there.
We say that every year, and then we don't. So I want to actually do it.
Yeah, we should do it. We should. I'm not even kidding. We should do it this year. We'll talk about that off the pod, but we'll get into some of what they said about the receivers. Let's get into the actual conversations that we were able to see, at least with these quarterbacks in the interviews. So let's start with. Actually, I want to get into one thing actually before that, a general point, and then we're going to get into individual. Something Chase Daniel, former quarterback, now he's an analyst, I believe, with Underdog, does a really good job, in my opinion, breaking down stuff. This is before we get into the specifics. It's a general point he made after he watched Hard Knocks. He said, one thing is clear from these quarterback interview clips of the combine with the Giants. This is 100% Dable's offense and not Kafka's. I don't recognize any of the Andy Reid terminology. And he said, Dable is running the show in New York. And he was talking about Gun Charlie right, 64 House X in, Gun Dolphin right, 72 Tundra float H angle. Those are specific ones that he said, look, none of this is from the Andy Reid terminology. Does that surprise you at all?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that doesn't surprise me. I think we worked under the assumption that it was Brian Dable's offense this entire time. We talked about that back in 2022 when Mike Kafka would come in and add elements of what Andy Reid taught him basically to this offense. But the framework and the foundation of this offense was always Brian Dable.
And I wonder if, I'm not saying this is the case, Nick, but I'm wonder if the fact that we're going to get most likely Brian Dable calling the plays this year from his offense with his terminology shows more of like will provide more of like synergy, right? Like Brian Dable, it's his offense, his terminology. He's calling the plays rather than Kafka trying to interpret it and call it in the way that he's calling it. I wonder if that adds anything to the offense or could potentially add efficiency. I don't know, but it's just something to consider because it was interesting when I heard that. It doesn't surprise me what Chase Daniel said, but it is just like confirmation, I guess, to what we're assuming, which is this is Brian Dable's offense, and he's going to have his own way of interpreting it, and we're going to see it this year.
We may have saw that last year. If we put the tinfoil hat on again, it seemed like Brian Dable may have took over play calling at some point last year. I'm wondering if that was during the 3-game winning streak. It's interesting.
Possible. It's possible. We don't know. That's all speculation, and it's possible, though. Let's start with we're going to get into each of these interviews. So we're going to get a little bit into Jaden Daniels interview, Caleb Williams interview, Drake Maye interview, and JJ McCarthy interview. Let's start with the Jaden Daniels interview. So I want to start first by what happened before any of these interviews. And I think it was before the Malik interview, where Brian Dable was like, I spent all day watching LSU, and I love this kid. And Joe Schoen goes, what do you mean, Brian Thomas or Nabers? Nabers. He snap answers Nabers. I also thought it was interesting. He didn't really say anything about the quarterback, Jaden Daniels, or the quarterback play at all there. And that's not to say
they wouldn't include it.
They might have not included it. Yeah. But when we got to the Jaden Daniels interview, I wasn't personally all that impressed by it, Nick. Again, he put him in front of the whiteboard. He had him put out a play. When he asked him to recall it the first time, Jaden Daniels starts to peek toward the board, and Brian Dable's like, no, don't look at the board. Just tell me what you got. And he spits it back out, and he's got something missing there, right? So then Brian Dable asks him a question about how you deal with adversity. Kind of try and like he's setting something up where he's going to ask him again to see his recall. And remember what the scout told him before this interview, that he struggles with recall, Jaden Daniels. And he asked him how he's going to deal with adversity. I didn't really love his answer there either. Like, oh, I dealt with it at LSU. It's fine. Dude, Baton Rouge media ain't anything like the New York media. It's not even remotely even close. It's fine to answer it that way or whatever. But I'm just saying, that ain't going to prepare you for what's going to come with the New York media. Just ask players like Mark Sanchez, Sam Darnold, like all the other, quarterbacks who have come through this place, Daniel Jones, whoever you want to ask, Eli Manning. But then he asks him to recall it again, and he gets it wrong again. It's one little detail, but he gets it wrong again. And so then he says, put up the play. Where are you going to go? What's the read here? And the answer from Jaden Daniels is, I'm just going to throw a touchdown. Like, it was funny. Brian Dable's like, I like that. It was funny. It was cool, but it wasn't really the right read or answer. Like, it's not really what you want to hear. And it didn't sound anything like what I heard from Caleb Williams when they asked him to break down his best play that he could come up with. That was a really cool breakdown. Or anything from Drake Maye when Drake Maye spitting off bang, 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 bang. So I don't know. I didn't come away loving that Jaden Daniels interview.
No, neither did I, but it was a 1 minute snippet of probably like a 20-minute interview. He could have been a little bit more impressive. And I'm wondering if the Giants like, all right, this guy's in our division now. Let's make him look like
make him look bad.
No, but it certainly, that was the most unimpressive interview of the ones that we saw. But the Giants also have editorial control, as we brought up, and now he's in the division. Who knows?
We don't know. I will say this about Daniels. If he makes it in the NFL, I think it will be based off of just his two things. One, his ridiculous, obviously, physical ability, both as a thrower and runner, mostly as, both. Two, what Joe Burrow said on a recent interview I heard with him on Part of My Take. He doesn't do any podcasts. Does like one Part of My Take podcast. And Burrow pointed to what I've always thought about Jaden Daniels, that effortless throwing motion. That type, when you have that kind of throwing motion, and you could watch Daniels, just go ahead, watch him after this and watch the other quarterbacks that came out. That style throwing motion, that quick, effortless, smooth release, that could work in the NFL because it beats pass rushes and it beats a lot of the issues that come up with quarterbacks. So that could all work. But I got to tell you, man, like this is the least I'm like if the Washington had gotten Drake Maye instead of Jaden Daniels, I'd be way, way, way more concerned personally about the future of this division. That's just me personally.
So would I. If Jaden Daniels didn't have Cliff Kingsbury as his offensive coordinator, I would be a little bit more concerned as well.
Yeah, that's another problem for him, though. Some view that as a positive, I guess, as a fit. I don't personally. I don't like what Cliff Kingsbury did with Caleb Williams' offense. I don't like what he did with the Kyler Murray offense. I don't like what he did with the Patrick Mahomes offense at Texas Tech, where they won 7 games and lost 7 games somehow with Patrick Mahomes. So I don't know, but I agree with you on that.
You ever feel sluggish or out of focus? Are you stressed? Has your digestive system caused discomfort or flatulence like a certain co-host on this podcast during a live stream? If so, you should check out AG1. When I started drinking AG1 daily, I could feel a real difference in my daily health. I had more energy, I was better off at the gym, and I could focus on my work in a much more efficient manner. That's because AG1 is a foundational nutrition supplement that supports your body's universal needs like gut optimization, stress management, and immune support. Since 2010, AG1 has led the future of foundational nutrition, continuously refining their formula to create a smarter, better way to elevate your baseline health. Not only did I replace my multivitamin with AG1, but I love that every scoop also includes prebiotics, probiotics, and digestive enzymes for gut support. I recommend AG1 to all my family and friends because AG1 has a team of doctors and scientists that formulate around the latest science and maintains high quality standards within the industry. Even my friends have started drinking AG1, and they always tell me how energetic they feel and how it's helped them out at the gym, and also it's helped them manage their stress levels. That's why we're happy to have AG1 as our partner. If you want to take ownership of your health, it starts with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3, K2, and 5 free AG1 travel packs when you first subscribe. Go to drinkag1.com/banter. That's drinkag1.com/banter to check it out. Our mental and physical well-being is of the utmost importance. Whether you're a world-class athlete or a podcaster like me, we all need to take that very seriously. That's why I'm excited that Unified Healing is sponsoring this episode of the Big Blue Banter podcast. Unified Healing is a new and super innovative global network of wellness centers powered by Energy Enhancement System, or EE System. If you haven't heard of the EE System yet, you'll want to listen up. This technology promotes wellness, deep relaxation, purification, and rejuvenation. Whether you're here in New York, New Jersey, Arizona, if you will, or hundreds of other locations across the globe, access to a center is easy and affordable. Interested in experiencing the EE System technology for yourself? Go to unifiedhealing.com/banter to learn more and find a center near you. That's UNIFYD healing.com/banter. No material or testimonials on the Unified Healing website are intended to be viewed as medical advice or a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare providers with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment. And before undertaking a new healthcare regimen, include EE System.
Let's get to the next one, the Drake Maye interview. That one to me was by far the most impressive. Obviously, the area scout. And by the way, these area scouts are kind of nailing what was going to happen. They're like, Jaden Daniels struggles with recall. Drake Maye is going to be perfect from a mental standpoint. Like, he's going to have great. And he just spit it back off at Brian Daboll. And even like little things that Brian Daboll was trying to kind of trip him up on, he just had it ready to go and just, in my mind, was advanced from the mental standpoint.
Well, yeah, of course. Drake Maye, your point absolutely stands. But these area scouts, they go to these places and they talk with a bunch of different people. They have so much inside information on these prospects, on these players, and they watch all of the tape. So they're going to have those types of notes available to them. And Drake Maye, yeah, he was dialed in, to say the least. He was able to recite exactly what Brian Daboll wanted him to recite. It seemed... And it's so funny, Dan, because let's go back to the pre-draft process. What did we hear about Drake Maye?
That's my point. We heard the opposite. Like
New York Giants fans, Big Blue Banter listeners, listen to me for a second. Next year, when we hear smokescreens that seem to deviate from the consensus that was already established, take it with a grain of salt, because we heard Drake Maye did terrible in the interviews and the Giants were so unimpressed. That was the rumor that we all heard. Did it seem that way according to Hard Knocks?
And why would that rumor might be out there? Would it be
why would that rumor
potentially really interested in trading up for Drake Maye and getting Drake Maye on their roster? Oh no, maybe it's not that, according to some fans.
Did it seem that way when Joe Schoen went over to Eliot Wolf and was like, "Yo, man,
No, that was trading up for Joe Alt, Nick. He was just trying to get
Marvin Harrison
Alt.
Jr.
Marvin Harrison Jr. They want the wide receiver to drop. Come on, guys. Get a grip with that type of stuff. It's right in front of your face. But as far as Drake Maye goes, I also heard in the pre-draft process, not just from the Giants, from other people, that this is just a physical talent. This is just somebody who's so raw. You got to develop. And then I heard Chase Daniel, I believe, or it was either Hayden Winks and Josh Norris, or Chase Daniel and Josh Norris, break down the tape of Drake Maye and show the intricacies to his processing from a mental standpoint, which I had already seen on tape and you had seen on tape, but was opposite of what we were told, that he's just raw. And I agree the footwork was an issue. Like, those are physical traits that can be worked on. But the processing, you could see on tape. You could see him work through reads. You can see him problem solve after the snap. That's always what impressed me a lot about Drake Maye. Not the most. His arm talent impressed me the most, and his willingness to fit tight windows. But it was, and his competitive nature. But it was the processing you see post snap, the problem solving that was there on tape. And I'm glad that it was obvious when you put him in front of a whiteboard how fast he can process information.
Yeah, 100%. And I know we're talking about the quarterbacks real quick, but I have a really important question I have to ask you about Hard Knocks episode 2.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think Brian Daboll can run a sub-7?
Oh, we were going to get to this. We can get to it now. So I'll say this. We don't have much of a point of reference to work with, a point of frame of reference to work with. And after this, I'm going to ask you if you think me and you can run a sub-7, which I hope we can.
Easily.
You think you easily can. I believe you easily can. I would hope I can.
I could probably I can run a sub-5.
You think you can run a sub-5? I don't think I can run a sub-5. I'll tell you that. Easily. I weigh 170. I just weighed myself, so I'm trying to lose a little bit of fat. I weigh 176 pounds. So I think it'd be a lot tougher for me. When I was 155, like in high school, I think I could beat a sub-5. Nowadays, dude, at 35, like with 176 on me. I don't know if I can still take
176 isn't a lot.
It's not great. It's not great for 5'8", but I want to get down to like 170 again, like back in the 160s where I think I could have it again. But sub 7 is probably very doable. But
for you, yeah. For Brian Dable.
For Brian Dable,
now, maybe.
In his 50s, at that weight that he was at the combine, because remember, he's probably lost like 40 pounds since the combine.
Yes,
of
course.
Looks like. Here's our only frame of reference. Shout out Justin Pennick, friend of the show. We've had him on. He's been on ours. We've been on his. He ran the combine, I believe, in a 6.33 this year, 6.34. Now, he's also lost a good amount of weight. Shout out Justin Pennick. Good job on you for that. And he's growing out a beard now, by the way. It looks good. I like that beard on you, Justin. You should keep going with the beard look, my boy. But he ran at 6.33. He runs at 6.33. I got to say, and this is not a knock, Justin, so don't take this way, that I think Brian can run at sub 7.
I don't.
Okay.
Maybe now. Definitely not at the combine. Maybe now. I'm going to say no, though.
The scouts certainly didn't, and Joe Schoen and the rest of them just laughing at him, essentially.
Yeah. Maybe that's why he lost the weight. You just got a fat shame.
That honestly could have been the exact. No one knows the reason why he went this hard on losing weight. That probably was it. Like, he was so offended. He's like, F you guys. He was so pissed. Like, it's like, kidding me? F you guys. He was like, not happy with it. He felt very slighted Brian Dable.
What did Rich Eisen run it? Doesn't Rich Eisen run it around
good
7?
Question. But he's in decent shape. Let's see Rich Eisen 40-yard dash for 2024. I am curious if he beat it. He had to have, right? Like, Rich Eisen's not running a 7+. Rich Eisen ran in 6.25. 6.25.
Yeah.
But like, Brian Dable is a bigger guy.
Yeah.
But here's the thing no one's considering, right? Brian Dable was a high school athlete. I was not. No offense, Justin Pennick was not. Rich Eisen was not. Like, I'm a football player. This is a guy who was an athletic football dude back in the day. I know he's older. I know he's in worse shape. But, like, he should be able to run it faster than Rich Eisen and me and Justin Pennick.
All right. Give Brian Dable 3 weeks to train for it, and maybe he'll be able to
training. You already go out and do it.
See, that's tough though, man. You pull shit at that age, 50. You just go out and you sprint for the first time in how long?
Obviously, you can stretch.
It doesn't matter, man. Your muscles need to get worked up when you're at that age. When you're in your 50s.
Probably, yeah. I'm sure, unless he's working out. I don't know how he lost the weight. If it was via working out and diet, or if it was just Ozempic based. Because I think that's the room. I mean, a lot of people are just Ozempicing around these days, dude. Did you hear about the dude in Hollywood? I heard this on part of my take. Some like famous guy in Hollywood was taking Ozempic and like got diarrhea in like a Hollywood party and like shat all over the place, which is hilarious. Apparently there's like diarrhea incidents that come from the Ozempic stuff.
He can afford Ozempic. He doesn't need to go on the Lizzo.
I'll never take Ozempic. If I need to lose weight, dude, I'll just try to do it the hard way. But to those who want to, I don't blame anybody for trying it, but like, it could, who knows how he lost it. But if he's working out to lose the weight, like also running and stuff, I think he's probably a better shot to break that sub 7 than people realize. I don't know. I'm saying he's going to break it. But let's get back on track here. Let's go to another.
Yeah. What's up with the heavy focus on Sam Hartman again?
Oh, your boy, Sam Hartman.
I know, dude. Sam Hartman got heavy FaceTime, and I appreciate it. He's a very handsome guy. And then Xavier, this is one thing I was like, all right, I get it. He broke the combine record, Xavier Worthy, but they spent like 5 minutes on it to the point where I'm like, I think the Giants are deliberately adding this stuff so they don't need to show more of their process. They're deliberately adding NFL type of shit so they don't really need to show what's going on behind closed doors just to fill up the 40 minutes.
I think so. I think you're right about that. It's a waste of time for us, and probably for everybody who gives a shit about watching that. Like,
you talk about Schmuckers and Xavier Worthy
with his hair. Like, who gives a shit about that? No offense, anyone who did like that. I mean, I'm sure there's shout out Giants Crush. She loves Sam Hartman. I'm sure she was enjoying watching that hair flowing as he's run the 40 and the Xavier Worthy stuff. But I did think it was funny when Joe Schoen was like, okay, is he now in the mix at number 6 with Xavier Worthy? And they're laughing about it because like that's the whole fun of the combine. Everyone's like, oh, he ran the 40 time. Now he's got to shoot up draft boards. Like, no, these guys are watching tape. They're not basing it all on the player, though, dude. But he was right, and I like Worthy's tape too, and I think he's going to be a good fit there. But he was right that like he's a guaranteed pick at the back end of round 1, which he was. But I don't know if I almost feel like he should have been anyway. I like Worthy enough. Maybe it's close without that, but without the speed, that level speed. But I don't know. I think you could see it on tape. I don't think you needed the 40-yard dash, but it is what it is. Obviously, that number's eye-popping. He broke a record there with 4.21. Though I like when the scouts were like, this is kind of weird how like it said 4.22, and then like 5 minutes later, and we all got like 4.22, 4.23 on our stopwatches, and like 5 minutes later, it's like, oh, he broke a record. But Hannah Burnett was like, no, that happens a lot. So she kind of put that conspiracy theory down. So let's get back to some of the interviews and stuff that stood out. JJ McCarthy one. We've done 2 of them. I thought it was interesting when JJ McCarthy told Brian Daboll a call, and Brian Daboll was like, whoa, what's all that? Like, that's all part of your call. He's like, if it was me, like, if you're working with me, we're going to condense that to like 1 or 2 words. And, JJ was like, oh, well, that's how Coach Harbaugh likes it. So I just thought that was really interesting to see JJ kind of spit out that 15-word play call, and Daboll's like, what are you doing, man? This is so unnecessary.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. And
I guess Harbaugh likes it that way.
Yeah. So from a mental side, I guess JJ is going to be able to retain whatever KOC throws at him.
You hope, but then again, it's still going to be different, right? Like when the terminology changes, that's kind of like on you to problem solve at that point. Just knowing he probably knows Harbaugh's system inside out, but also it's just funny the reverence he has for Harbaugh. He's like, no, that's how Coach Harbaugh liked it. That's how it is. Like, Harbaugh has that kind of like aura over these college players.
He certainly does, but that's what you should have. You won a national championship.
He deserves it. Yes.
Yeah.
He earned it for sure. And then finally, the Caleb Williams interview. Look, I think both sides went into that one knowing this is probably not going to happen. We don't really have a chance to draft you, and you're not. And from his point, he's like, I'm probably not have to worry about playing here. I know where I'm going. But I did love when Brian Daboll asked him to recall what's your favorite play, and he took a second to really think about it, and then he spit it out on the board. It's a cover 2 beater. And I loved how he broke it down. And Daboll was like, oh, you have the confidence basically in your arm talent and timing to rip that ball to that spot. And he's like, yeah, I do. I can beat that spot. And he's like, well, if you don't have it, what else can you do? Can you throw the back shoulder? He's like, yeah, I can throw the back shoulder. And I've thrown the back shoulder. And Brian Daboll loved that. He's like, when I had Brett Favre, I used to run this exact play a bunch, and he'd throw the back shoulder. And it's just so cool to hear Daboll like recall working with Brett Favre and like how this was a play that like Brett Favre loved too. And he would run it a bunch. And I think in a lot of ways, it has to do with having that kind of elite level velocity and arm talent to run a play like that. Like Brett Favre, obviously elite level. He can beat safeties to the spot. Caleb Williams, unbelievable arm talent from what I saw on film. He can beat DBs to the spot. So I think it depends on the quarterback as far as what's your favorite play call going to be, because you got to know what kind of arm talent you have and do you trust your arm talent. When they asked Jaden Daniels kind of break down that one play he loved and where do you love to go with the ball here, he even said, Jaden Daniels, based on the talent we have, I like to go. And he's like, is that Nabers? Like when he's pointing to that, he's like, yeah, that would be Nabers. And like, great. Like Jaden Daniels had Malik Nabers going against college DB, so he can throw that, he can make that pass. But like, it's not always going to be Malik Nabers. Like when Caleb Williams is talking about the play that he loved, who was he throwing to last year? Brendan Rice? Like who's running the routes for USC? Not really any kind of elite level talent whatsoever. So I thought it was interesting just to consider those 2 things.
I agree. And speaking of Malik Nabers, should we get into what the Giant scouts were saying about him? Because I think it's really important.
Let's do that and then get into his interview.
Yeah, so Scott Hamill was the scout, same scout as Jaden Daniels, obviously. Said he's passionate. He plays with a chip on his shoulder. He trains hard. He certainly loves football, but he wants the targets, and he'll be vocal if he does not receive the targets. This is typical wide receiver diva type of stuff, right? But Brian Daboll, as we'll get into, absolutely love this. And then Hamill said, we need to get around this kid and see if we can work with him, considering there's a lot of personality to him.
Yep, and that's the key. And you even heard it, Nick, and I don't want to jump around too much because I want to get into the Malik Nabers interview, but you heard it after the interview where Brandon Brown and Joe Schoen, Brandon Brown's like, they both kind of were like, I just need to learn a lot more about this kid.
Yeah.
I just need to know. And then we obviously got the Giants putting in their due diligence, the pre-draft visits, the extra time they spent with him. But it felt like at the combine, they really didn't have a good grasp of who he was yet as a person. But in the interview, we got to learn a little bit more, and so did the Giants. Malik Nabers admitted he's not okay with losing. He hates losing more than he likes winning. And he also admitted that he's not really okay with not getting targets in the passing game or being involved in the passing game early, because he's like, I work my ass off at practice all week and they're installing plays for me, and then it just doesn't come to me. And I don't like that. I want to be involved in the offense. And that was kind of like Brian Daboll was like, I don't hate this. I get it. I'm fiery too. And Joe Schoen's laughing it off. He's like, yeah, buddy, you were.
Like I said, you need to harness that energy.
You need to harness that energy, right? He's like, yeah, even I need to at some time.
Certainly Brian Daboll needs to harness that energy too. He needs to definitely take into account the advice he's bestowing onto Malik Nabers.
And on that note, Nick, are you concerned at all with this answer? You know, this feeling, this mindset Nabers has about not being okay with not getting targets in the game early and not being involved offense early, because guess what? We've seen a lot of receivers struggle to get targets in this offense. Jalen Hyatt struggled to get targets. Wan'Dale Robinson struggled to get targets. Darius Slayton, every receiver has struggled to get targets because the passing game has struggled to move the football and has struggled to throw the ball straight up passing yards have not been a part of this offense since about 2015. Maybe 2015 is the last time they actually threw the ball for like 250 plus a game or anything even close to that range. They're down in the 200-yard range a game. Tyrod Taylor actually did it, I think, 2 or 3 times in a row last year through 279 and 270 something back to back. The last 2 games of the season, Tyrod Taylor, I think, hit that 250 plus mark. But outside of those Taylor games, this offense just hasn't thrown the football for more than basically 200 yards a game for a long time. Jones hit it sometimes in 2019 again. But, just not a lot of passing yards in this offense. Obviously, the couple Vikings games from 2022. So what are your thoughts on that? Like, what if the Giants offense, again, is mostly run-based? It's struggling to move the ball through the air. It's going to be an issue for the Giants and for Nabers.
I don't think concerned is the right word, but it's something that you need to keep in mind. The Giants have dealt with this, right? Like Odell Beckham Jr. was very similar, right? He's somebody who wanted the football. It ended up actually being a chasm between the relationship with Odell Beckham Jr. and the New York Giants. You hope that history does not repeat itself with a very talented LSU wide receiver. We know he's going to be the focal point of the offense, as has been divulged already, and as logic would tend to lead us towards, right? But with Malik Nabers, when you're the focal point, defenses are going to focus on you, and that could open up opportunities for Jalen Hyatt and Wan'Dale Robinson. I hope that if he is not getting the targets, that's going to result in success from the offense because Wan'Dale Robinson, Jalen Hyatt, and everyone else, they're doing their jobs. So that's going to result in winning, which he likes to do. And he hates losing, right? He hates losing more than he likes winning, but winning is better than losing. So I'm hoping if the Giants are winning football games and he only gets like 6 targets, 3 catches for 30 yards, he's not going to be a diva about it. I can't sit here and say that I'm fully confident that's the case. I can't. But I hope that he is mature enough to realize, hey, man, like we're winning football games. I'm a big reason why, even though it's not reflective in the stats.
I'm with you on that, Nick. And I know it's been maybe I think it was Art Stapleton who might have talked about this, how maybe things would have been different for Odell Beckham Jr. here with the Giants if Brian Daboll was his coach. And, this discussion on how Brian Daboll can really understand this type of diva wide receiver personality, hone it in, harness it because of what he said. I'm very skeptical of that point by Art Stapleton in that line of thinking, because I have not seen that proven yet, that Brian Daboll is this like wide receiver whisperer who can just keep somebody, happy. If they're losing, dude, and he's not getting targets, I don't think having Brian Daboll, Andy Reid, Tom Landry, whoever the hell you want to put at coach, doesn't matter. I don't think there's any wide receiver whisperers. You want the ball, you want to win. If those two things aren't happening, winning and the passing yards aren't there, the receiving yards aren't there, I don't think having Brian Daboll is going to make much of a difference. And I don't think it would have made a difference with Odell Beckham Jr., quite frankly, either. Though, then again, Brian Daboll's offense could have unlocked a whole different version of Eli Manning that we don't know about. That could have been unbelievably fun to watch. In which case, Beckham would have had yards and would have had maybe more winning. So could have changed from that standpoint. But I don't buy the whole Brian Daboll's going to be this wide receiver whisperer thing. I think, the Giants are going to have to move the ball through the air this year. They're going to have to get the ball to Nabers. Jones is going to have to get the ball out on time. He's going to have to have better ball placement. He's going to have to throw for more than 200 yards a game for this thing to work out early with Nabers. I do honestly believe that, Nick. And I just have confidence that it will. I said Nabers can make this offense very quarterback proof, in the sense that you don't really need to do much as a quarterback to make it work. And I do honestly believe that he gets open fast, and he's going to hopefully be able to they're going to find ways to get him targets. I hope.
I hope to. It could be a small matter, and that small matter could become a big matter if all of the things that you just said actually ends up coming true. So it's something the Giants got to monitor. They got to be on top of it, and we just hope that Malik Nabers can harness that passion.
And then in the post-Nabers interview, I thought it was interesting, the conversation that Joe Schoen and Brandon Brown had from multiple standpoints. The first being, they were like, look, I was expecting a totally different interview when they were. Yeah. So Shane said that, like, I watch him on tape and he's got that dog in him and he's running people over and he's running into contact. I thought he'd be more of like, that type of personality in the interview. He was more of a laid back guy. And then Brandon Brown was kind of saying like, yeah, look, like, we don't really know that much about him. We still need to learn a lot more about who he is. But he did say there was one other thing that was really interesting to me about what that conversation it was, that Joe Schoen said to Brandon Brown, I already talked to Daniel Jones about it, and he's already looked at him, and he loves him in regards to Malik Nabers.
That is very interesting. And I like the quote by Brandon Brown as well. Name me a great wide receiver, cornerback, or pass rusher who was a fucking choir boy.
Yeah, yeah, they got it. And he said he's gonna bring something different than what we have as a team, that dog in him. That's not a shot at Wandale, Jalen Hyatt, Darius Slayton. They have their own personalities, and you don't have to be a dog to win. But it is something to say that we're gonna get a dog on this offense, somebody who's really that. Now, again, Odell Beckham was a dog. Being a dog, it's great when it's working. It maybe is bad if the offense is so dysfunctional that you can't get him the dog the ball. But having that mindset, man, I'd always rather have the dog, the guy who's like willing to do anything it takes to win and really gives a shit about winning.
Yeah, a dog combined with an elite skill set.
Right.
If you are competent on offense, which history's not on the Giants side in recent memory with that, but if you're competent on offense, that person should be satiated, and then that should result in wins. It's just, holy crap, can the Giants protect Daniel Jones? Can Daniel Jones get him the football? Can the ancillary pieces other than Malik Nabers end up taking advantage of the one-on-one matchups that should be presented to them with Malik Nabers playing opposite of them? All of those kind of remain question marks.
Just get the ball out on time and get it into decent ball placement. Just let him do the rest, man. Just get the ball out, man. Get it out of your hands. That's all that really matters to me. Just figure out a way to be more decisive with the ball and let it loose. And I know Brian Dable wants that too. And we've seen those little clips of him discussing those things on the sideline. But another couple of interviews I want to talk about, the Odunze interview and the Harrison interview, Nick. I want to start with the Odunze interview. Obviously incredibly impressive. A lot of people are talking about this on Twitter. And there was some speculation that the Giants themselves were a bit torn on the wide receiver decision between Odunze and Malik Nabers at 6 overall. Some even have suggested that, Nabers was Dable's guy and he won this battle, but maybe Odunze was Shane's guy, or other people in the organization wanted Odunze. I think that speculation, Nick, is not really based on much, to be honest. I don't think, at least from my perspective, I don't think we saw anything in that episode that led me to believe that other people in the Giants organization were torn on this or they wanted Odunze. But it's easy to see why that might be the case when you listen to this interview. This dude came off very impressed and very polished. And then you saw him run the drills, the gauntlet at the combine, and you saw the Giants were super impressed by him. And that in his 40 time, he was a smooth route runner. He moves really well without the football in his hands. In addition to all the other things we talked about in his breakdown, we loved him as a prospect too. Do you think, Nick, that there was any level of being torn on this Nabers versus Odunze decision for the Giants?
I think there was some level of that, but the Giants wanted a lightning rod. The Giants wanted an explosive player. They wanted somebody who was like a true difference maker. And we evaluated the tape of Odunze and Malik Nabers. And look, Odunze is a very good wide receiver. Malik Nabers is in a different echelon. He is a better overall prospect than a Odunze. Odunze is a bigger body, doesn't create separation in the same light. I think Malik Nabers is that type of player that you give him an angle, that angle can get erased, and he's gone. Whereas Odunze is not that type of player. So I think just from who's a better prospect standpoint, Malik Nabers, it's on Malik Nabers' side. Odunze might be better from those intangible standpoint, sure. But what would you prefer if Malik Nabers is not going to be a problem for you? From a locker room standpoint, you would prefer the better prospect. You would prefer the explosive playmaker after losing Saquon Barkley, your most explosive playmaker since 2018. So it makes sense that they went with Malik Nabers from that standpoint. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there was a huge discussion about it, probably all the way up into April, but I'm imagining the Giants probably saw it similar to us, that Malik Nabers can be a home run hitter for your offense.
Yeah, I just think I don't like the Odunze Malik Nabers comparison, Nick, because I think they're so different. They're completely different prospects. Like, if you want to look for something I'd be more willing to entertain, it's Odunze and Marvin Harrison. To me, those are more similar prospects, and that you can evaluate when you watch the tape. Okay, this guy does this better, but
from a talent standpoint, right?
From their skill set standpoint, correct? Yeah, not from who's ranking, not like that. I mean, from a skill set standpoint, because I don't want to rank, like, it's stupid to me to rank Odunze and Nabers when they're so different and what they can offer your offense. Like, if you're debating where were the Giants at with the decision, it could just be simply put as Nabers is a much better fit for what we need in our offense right now. And on that from that front, there's nowhere close, because Odunze is not like Nabers at all as a prospect. Not body type, not route running, not release off the line of scrimmage. None of this stuff. Speed, explosive, like none of this is similar. They're different prospects. So that's the part did Odunze's interview come off better? Sure. Obviously, I mean, he sounded more mature, and he obviously, spoke really well. I'm not breaking any news here. But that's not the decision. Like, the decision isn't based on that, I don't think. And speaking of another interview, Nick, that I at least came off really impressed with, it was Marvin Harrison Jr., who, again, I think, a similar situation where it's kind of just like going through the motions with this one, in the sense that I don't think he ever really thought he was falling past Arizona. I think that was the best kept hidden secret in the draft. Whenever anyone would say, like, oh, the Giants could maybe trade up to 4 with Arizona, I'm just laughing it off in my head, Nick, because I knew Arizona wanted Marvin Harrison Jr. and wasn't going to entertain moving off of that. But, I love how he didn't throw his quarterback Kyle McCord under the bus, because I certainly did when we did our Marvin Harrison film review in the pre-draft process, because McCord was terrible, as the Giants scout pointed out. Like, this was a horrible ball. You saw that all the time throughout his tape versus the CJ Stroud tape, and he didn't throw him under the bus. He's like, it's my fault. But I also thought I also love when Marvin Harrison was like, yeah, I'm not going to do any of this crap during the pre-draft process. Like, I don't need to train to run these drills. I put my shit on tape. I'm the best. I'm preparing to be the best NFL receiver. Point blank. Don't expect me at the pro day. Don't expect me at the combine. It is what it is.
Yeah, I appreciated that too. And he earned that. Yeah. For years, we were talking about Marvin Harrison Jr. Why does he have to train to run around in his freaking underwear?
He earned that.
But now he better play up to it, because on the flip side of that, not to be hypocritical, Evan Neal, we thought maybe he earned that. And now look.
True.
So Marvin Harrison Jr. needs to play up to it, which I think he will.
Very true. Good point, by the way. We're going to get into the Saquon stuff. We'll close on that, Nick, but I want to first get into something that was really interesting. We always go through the combine process and we wonder, Nick, we don't have any details on it until now. We actually do in this episode. We wondered, like, is Joe Schoen doing any like coach speak or GM speak at the combine? Yeah. Is it natural? Are the questions natural? And we got to see an insight into this with Dion Dargan, who works for the Giants, prepping Joe Schoen for the combine. Going back and forth on what might be asked, how those reactions to those answers might have come from the media. And he even said, Dion, that my job is to track Giants Twitter religiously, which Joe Schoen's like, oh, you got to get off Twitter. He's like, no, never mind. I actually need you to do that. At the end, he kind of like doubled back. He's like, actually, no, I need you on Giants Twitter.
Probably
he's like,
stumbled across both of our profiles. Like, look at these two freaking idiots.
Yeah, I'm sure he has. Like, because of course he has, because he's seen like other people doing like breakdowns of Joe Schoen's body language, which he told Joe Schoen about. He's like, dude, they're going to break down your body language. So like, here's the big talking points. They're going to want to know about the quarterbacks and everything you say about the quarterback. And what was the other one? Saquon, I think it was the other one. Yeah. So you better be careful with both of those. I just thought it was really interesting to see that. And then I think HBO did a great job of kind of like editing it and meshing it to the point where like those questions that the way Joe Schoen answered Dion in his pre-combine interview were like kind of exactly to the point what he said to the media, just very cookie cutter. And now we know from this point on, Nick, that we can't really look too much into this.
From an editing standpoint, it was done marvelously by HBO, but this was deliberately added when it was the behind the scenes while Joe Schoen was getting coached up. Joe Schoen said this about Saquon Barkley: I know he doesn't want to be franchised, but I wanted to give him a lot of money a year ago and he didn't want that. And then him and the other guy started laughing. That was deliberately put in there.
Good point, by the way. Like, he's like, oh, no, I'm not going to actually say that. But I mean,
but then they put it on the HBO. Like,
yeah, it did kind of say, and now we kind of know it. That was interesting. We're going to get into Saquon stuff. We'll wrap with that. But before we wrap with that, we missed we didn't miss it, but we've saved a big point of this episode. And that was Joe Schoen's conversation. First, his conversation with Brandon Brown, followed by his conversation with Eliot Wolf, the Patriots general manager. So first, his conversation with Brandon Brown about potentially trading up for number 3, where Joe Schoen straight up, no, I don't know how people are looking into this in other ways. Still, some people can't grasp this concept, but straight up said, we're interested in trading for number 3. These are exact words. We're interested in trading for number 3. We want to let them know that we're interested in trading for that. So before they do anything, maybe trade it to another team, they at least circle back and give us an opportunity to make that trade. And Brandon Brown says, all right, well, why don't you go let him know right now? And so Joe Schoen walks over there to Eliot Wolf and he tells him, look, we're interested in trading that, please. But this is all, by the way, back in February. And, and then Eliot Wolf, my interpretation of that, Nick, was Eliot Wolf did not seem all that interested in trading number 3, even back in February. I felt like he had no real interest in that conversation. He's like, yeah, other teams have called. It's kind of just been this conversation that we've had. And it just kind of like struck me as like, this deal was just never going to happen. The Giants could try as hard as they want, offer as much as they want to try to get Drake Maye. And I know some people are saying, no, they said they're interested in trading up to 3, but it's not guaranteed that it was for a quarterback or Drake Maye. Yeah, dude, you think they're going to trade up for an offensive tackle wide receiver? Why don't you just look at NFL history and educate yourself before making that declaration? It's really frustrating, Nick. I'm sorry to go that route, but it's just insanely frustrating. It's obviously if they were going to trade up, it was for a quarterback. There's no real reason to debate that because it's so obvious. Like, the sky is blue. Today it was a little orange today. Is it always blue? No, it's not always blue. Some days it's not going to look blue, but the sky is blue in the end. So that's where I'm at.
Might have been for that quarterback who did really well in the Hard Knocks episode, maybe. I don't know. You think so?
No, Drake Maye, who they showed having an unbelievable interview with the Giants, probably, and who they went to. Joe Schoen went to 6 games to scout, and who I had heard that they really loved in the pre-draft process. I don't know. It might have been, but what we did get to see was clear evidence that they were interested in trading up to number 3, which I did not expect the Giants to put on this Hard Knocks series. If it was me and I was the Giants, I probably would have left this out. And maybe HBO didn't let them, but I would have been like, HBO, it's over. We didn't get Drake Maye. They didn't consider trading up back at any point, really, or they at least didn't strongly consider it. And now we got Daniel Jones. Let's just leave this one out.
They left plausible deniability by not mentioning why and not like talking a lot about the quarterbacks, but they showed the quarterback interviews. Be like, hey, look how cool these interviews are, and we want to trade up.
Yeah. And it's cool how they showed it. Like, that's how it starts, right? Like, he just goes up to Eliot Wolf, walks over to the booth, and is like, look, man, we're interested. Let us know before you go. And again, did you get the feel that Eliot Wolf was really all that interested in trading back?
I mean, it's hard to discern from that little conversation, but he's basically like, yeah, I got a bunch of offers on the table already. Where are you guys picking at? Oh, 6. All right. Like, no, not really. I mean, dude, we all know they needed a quarterback. Mac Jones's time was done there. So what the hell are they going to do when they have the 3rd overall pick?
And not every organization is like tipping off who they love in the pre-draft process. Just because the Patriots weren't like all over Drake Maye in the pre-draft process doesn't mean that they didn't love the dude from the very start. And I think it's clear to me, at least, with them not really taking the Vikings offer, which was insane and a lot of capital, and not even really considering that they love Drake Maye, and we'll see that play out. Obviously, it was tough. It was tough for me to watch Drake Maye in that interview. I know how I feel about Drake Maye from watching the tape, but then to also get that, it's like, damn, they were really close to getting this level prospect if things had broken a different way.
I know.
You were wishing that one at some point.
You were wishing he was a dum-dum.
But
you were wishing he went up there and said, I don't know.
No, I wish he just threw it for the Patriots and just gave him a bad interview. Let him fall, baby. Maybe the Vikings would have even traded at it. I don't even know at that point. But
who's their offensive coordinator now? Alec Van Pelt, the guy from the Browns? Yes. Okay. See how that works out.
Yeah, we're going to see how it works out. The offensive line is the biggest issue there, in my opinion, for New England.
Dude, who's their skill? I'm a big fan of
They have nothing on that roster.
You got Hunter Henry. You got Jalen Polk now, and the other receiver from UCF, Baker. But like, he is put into a bad situation.
As bad as it gets. But I think he'll be. I actually still have confidence he'll be able to come out of that. I really believe in him as a prospect. But I mean, the point is, Joe Schoen literally said on air, we're interested in trading for the pick. Like, I don't know how anyone at this point can deny that, though somehow there are people on Giants Twitter who are still denying it. I got to be honest with you, Nick. I find it really odd and weird that people would even care to take that line to deny it. It's just, I'll never understand it, but to each his own.
I don't think there's a big contingent of people who are.
No, it's a small contingent. It's just
you let the small contingent get to you, bro.
It's not getting to me. It's just weird, dude. It's like, why do you care? Why do you care about denying this? Just admit it. It's over. They tried trading up to 3 for quarterback Drake Maye. They didn't get it done. It's over with. Now Daniel Jones is your quarterback. You're done. It's over. We don't need to go back and reverse this stuff, especially when the Giants are literally letting HBO publish it. But
speaking of the quarterback, I'm glad you brought that up because there was one very small point of the Hard Knocks episode where Joe Schoen essentially was like, Daniel Jones might not be available for the first 3 weeks. We don't want to start 0-3. We need to get that second quarterback. And I don't know if this was deliberately put in there for HBO to point to the fact that Daniel Jones is the de facto number 1 quarterback, or if that's actually how Joe Schoen was viewing it this entire time. He's like, we want to get a guy like Drew Lock to come in and start a couple games. And then once Daniel Jones is ready, he can be the starting quarterback, and he is the starting quarterback. Which side of the coin do you fall on there?
I actually, and this is funny because it's just talking about how, like, I don't understand the people who are saying the things about the trading up. I think you should be more like willing to just entertain both sides. Like, I'm entertaining both sides here. Like, I think my takeaways from this episode and the last one is the Giants are still confident in Daniel Jones. Joe Schoen specifically is confident in Daniel Jones being the quarterback and building around him, even with the comments like, we already talked to Daniel Jones and he loves Malik Nabers. So I think despite trying to trade up for Drake Maye, who they obviously loved, they didn't get it done, and they still like Jones. You can do two things at once. You can like Daniel Jones and the potential for him to kind of bounce back with a receiver that he likes, like Nabers, while also, understanding that there's an opportunity to get a prospect you love at quarterback that can really upgrade this position. So I really think they're confident in Jones to be the QB1 for this year. And hopefully, he can get back in time. It looks to me right now, Nick, like he's going to be ready for the start of camp. I can only hope that's the case.
Yeah, that would be awesome for Daniel Jones. And look, man, 4th year in a row we're saying this, but it's time to nut up or shut up, Daniel Jones.
Yeah, this is it. I hope, but this has got to be it, right? Like this is it. The only thing is if they leave him, if it's another like 2022, if it's another like open-ended where you're like, oh, well, it was a good year. They grinded to a wild card and lost, and they didn't really take many jump as a passing game, but they won some games and he got some comebacks and he just needs another year with this to happen better for him. That's the only thing. We'll have to see how that happens because then they're not going to be in position to draft a quarterback or really get one. It's
all about
this is what happens to like a lot of NFL teams. You get stuck in this position. It's not just
all about the options you have, man.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And what will you have? We don't know what the Giants will have. That remains to be seen. Depends how they do this year. One final thing. Let's wrap up with the Barkley stuff, man. I just got to say, that conversation between Joe Schoen and Saquon Barkley was cold as mother effer. Like, that was awkward. That was cold just from the very start, where he's like, hey, man, how you doing? He's like, are you in New Jersey? Are you still in New Jersey? Yeah, I'm in New Jersey. Like, Saquon sounded so done with this, man. And maybe it's because someone speculated because maybe he thought like Joe Schoen was going to spring on him at the end of that conversation or after some small talk, like, hey, we're going to tag you again. And he was going to be pissed. But I don't know. It sounded like he was done with him. And then even to the point where he was like, look, we're going to do right by you and let you hit the market instead of tagging you. But just, can you at least promise me you'll come back to us? He's like, what do you mean come back to you? And he's like, it's like, circle back. And he's like, yeah. Like, circle back. There's Joe Schoen's like, yeah, circle back. He's like, you know where I'm at. You know where I want to be. It's kind of like shit. Saquon's kind of like, you know what I want. Make it happen. There ain't going to be no coming back to you and you guys lowball me. And he kept dangling Joe Schoen, Nick. I thought it was interesting. He kept dangling the whole Ring of Honor thing. Like, you want to be part of this Giants Ring of Honor, don't you? Like, this is what we got over you, baby. That's our leverage.
Well, that's the leverage, dude. And that's like, it's kind of sad, right?
Yeah.
Especially like there was so much bad blood at that point. And I felt like HBO did a good job inserting that one little comment that Joe Schoen made before he jumped on the phone. I think it was while he was talking with Ed Berry, his agent. He was like, look, Saquon's basically he said something to the effect, I didn't write it down, like that Saquon Barkley was pissed because he felt like the Giants were lowballing him. Yeah. So, and this has been a contentious thing that they've really made a point in both Hard Knock episodes dating back to last November. So we're talking about November of 2022. This has been a huge contentious situation between Saquon Barkley and Joe Schoen. So Saquon gets on the phone. He thought he was going to get tagged again. I think that's a pretty safe bet, but it definitely seemed like Saquon Barkley was just done with being a New York Giant. But he kind of came out and was like, yeah, you know where I want to be. Okay. And then he ends up going to Philadelphia on the first day of free agency.
Right.
And more power to him. He got a little bit more money out there. And people are like, oh, it was only a little bit more money, but it's like $500,000 more guaranteed money, I think, too.
Sure.
It's not small, a bigger opportunity to win.
Play behind a great offensive line.
Play behind a great offensive line. Like, you get it.
It's a no-brainer for Saquon. I've felt that way since the start.
Yeah, I know. We've been clear about that on this podcast. And when you're a player, when you're a super athlete like Saquon Barkley, who has just been praised his entire life, and you feel like you're being spurned by an organization that has kind of been a dumpster fire since you arrived, and you've received so many carries and you have all of these injuries, I think a fresh start makes sense. That's a logical thing for Saquon Barkley. I don't know if you watched the preview for the third episode. John Mara. Yeah. John Mara.
I'm actually like genuinely looking forward to getting to watch John Mara's reaction to Barkley signing with the Eagles. Like, that's entertainment 101 right there. Like, it's going to be the best part potentially of the series, watching that reaction from John when he hears the news.
Will they actually show that though?
I think they'll show it before.
I think
show me a reaction, please. If I need to see another chair thrown in an office, remember when he threw the chair in the press box? I need to see another John Mara chair throw. It's about time. We've been waiting a while for the next chair throw to be televised. Let's see another John Mara chair throw, please.
I want chair throws. I want medium Pepsis. It's going to be a good time.
Yeah, I promise me. Well, one final thing. We did hear another mention by Joe Schoen when he was talking with Saquon Barkley's agent before the Saquon Barkley call of the data that shows about what the data says about signing running backs at 27 years old. So, and it kind of sounded like Joe Barkley's agent knew that Joe Schoen was just already made his decision. It all kind of felt like it was over, despite it not technically being over just yet.
Yeah, those are difficult conversations to have, but I 100% agree with you. It seems like Joe Schoen is dialed into that. But as he said, he offered $12.5 million back in 2022, November of 2022, and it wasn't accepted.
Right. And that's reality of the situation. Saquon was expecting more. He thought he would get more. And that was probably maybe an issue with his old agents. He's had new agents since. He's hired new agents. That could be a part of the reason why. But look, in the end, it's no love lost for me, Nick. I don't really think this franchise is any closer to winning with Barkley under contract for the next 2 years at 28 years old. Like, this wasn't the team for him. Like, he needs to join an Eagles type team with a great, already established O-line and a winning already a chance to win a Super Bowl. He's not meant to be 27 years old on a team toiling away from, and trying to just go back to relevancy.
You know how much it's going to suck though when the Giants.
He's going to be great for them. It's the O-line.
Just that, but when we play them twice. Yeah.
He's going to he's going to go hard in those games. He's going to be great.
Boston Scott's not there anymore. So those are going to be Saquon Barkley's touchdowns.
Yeah, they are. Speaking of Barkley, I don't even know how to approach him from a fantasy standpoint. It's a really interesting option for that. But people don't want to hear about fantasy football stuff.
I kind of do though. How are you approaching that?
I don't love that he's going to the receptions are going to go way down with Jalen Hurts, but I feel like the touchdown
that might change though. So let me throw something at you and apologize to the audience who don't give a shit about fantasy. Kellen Moore is his offensive coordinator now.
I was thinking always.
I think it's more it's the tush push. That's what I'm concerned.
Tush push hurts him too.
Huge.
But maybe they look at it like we can protect Jalen Hurts and protect our quarterback from an injury standpoint since we signed Barkley and let him take the hits on those goal line stuff.
And how effective is the tush push now that Jason Kelce isn't there?
True. Those are all big questions that will be answered. But we don't want to go too deep on fantasy football talk because some people don't like it, though I'm sure others do like it, by the way, for those of you who don't. So try to be cognizant of others. Always try to think of other people. That's a good way to live your life. And some little life advice to end the show. But Nick, for Nick and for myself, thank you for listening to the Big Blue Banter recap of Hard Knocks Episode 2. We'll recap every episode. We may have some interesting content coming as well Thursday of this week, something different that we're debating doing that we're leaning toward that we're going to be doing. And then we did say we're going to get back to live shows and mailbag. So I want to do a mailbag next week, Nick, or maybe end of this week. We haven't done one in a while, so I'm sure there's a lot of questions. So anyway, thanks again for listening. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you soon.